Remember when your dad left for work in the morning with a lunch pail, came home at 5, and supported the whole family on one paycheck? Remember when jobs were jobs, not gigs, and a man's work defined who he was? Want to go back to when work meant something different? The 1960s were the last decade when a working man could support a family, buy a house, and retire with a pension, all from jobs that have completely disappeared. Your father or grandfather likely worked one of these jobs. They weren't glamorous, they weren't easy, but they were honest work that paid honest wages and came with dignity, respect, and security. This was the era of the company man. You got hired at 18 or 20, worked for the same company for 40 years, and retired with a gold watch and a pension that would carry you through. Loyalty went both ways. The company took care of you, and you took care of the company. These jobs built Canada. They built the infrastructure, delivered the goods, kept the systems running. The men who worked them weren't looking for fulfillment or passion. They were providing for their families, and they did it with pride. But the world changed. Technology advanced, globalization hit, automation took over, and one by one, these jobs disappeared. The factories closed, the routes were eliminated, the positions were made redundant, and with them went a whole way of life. In this video, we're counting down 10 jobs that Canadian fathers had in the 1960s that no longer exist. Not just any jobs, the ones that defined working-class masculinity, that put food on tables and roofs over heads. Some of these will hit you with memories of your own father. Some will remind you of uncles, neighbors, or friends' dads. And all of them will take you back to a time when a man's work was his identity. Before we punch in, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got 10 jobs to cover, and trust me, every single one is worth remembering. Let's get to work. Job 1, Milkman. Let's start with the milkman because every neighborhood had one, and every kid knew the sound of those bottles clinking at dawn. The milkman was a fixture of Canadian life from the early 1900s through the 1970s. He'd start his route before sunrise, driving a truck or even a horse-drawn wagon in the early days, delivering fresh milk in glass bottles to doorsteps across his territory. This wasn't just delivery, it was a relationship. The milkman knew every family on his route. He knew who wanted extra cream on Thursdays, who needed butter and eggs, who was away on vacation. He'd leave the bottles in the milk box or on the porch, collect the empties, and move on to the next house. The job required early mornings. 3 or 4 a.m. starts were common. It required physical strength. Those crates were heavy, and you'd carry dozens of them upstairs and down walkways. And it required reliability. People depended on their milk delivery like clockwork. Dairies like Silverwood, Borden, and Beatrice employed thousands of milkmen across Canada. It was steady work with decent pay and benefits. You could support a family on a milkman's wages. But the job started disappearing in the 70s as supermarkets became the norm and refrigerators got bigger. Why pay for delivery when you could buy milk cheaper at the store? By the 80s, most milk routes were gone. For those whose fathers were milkmen, the memories are vivid. Dad leaving before dawn, coming home mid-morning smelling like dairy. The pride he took in his route and his customers. Job 2, Railway Brakeman. The railway brakeman was essential to Canada's transportation network, and in the 60s, thousands of men worked the rails. Brakemen were part of the train crew responsible for coupling and uncoupling cars, operating switches, and most importantly, manually setting the brakes on freight cars. Before automated braking systems, this was done by hand, climbing on top of moving freight cars and turning brake wheels. It was dangerous work. Men fell from trains. They got crushed between cars. They worked in all weather, blazing summer heat, brutal winter cold. But it paid well, came with union protection, and offered job security. The Canadian Pacific Railway and Canadian National Railway employed thousands of brakemen. It was a job that often ran in families. Fathers training sons, passing down the knowledge and the union card. The work was physical and demanding. Long hours, irregular schedules, time away from home. But there was pride in it. You were keeping Canada moving. You were part of the backbone of the country's economy. Automation killed the brakeman position. Air brakes, remote-controlled switches, and smaller train crews made the job obsolete. By the 80s, most brakeman positions were gone. For those whose fathers worked the rails, the memories include Dad coming home exhausted, the railway pension that supported the family after retirement, and the stories of life on the trains. Job 3. Factory Foreman. The factory foreman was the man in the middle, not quite management, not quite labor, but essential to keeping production running. In the 60s, Canadian manufacturing was booming. Auto plants, steel mills, textile factories, appliance manufacturers, they all needed foremen to supervise the workers, maintain quality, and keep the line moving. The foreman was typically a worker who'd been promoted from the floor. He knew the job because he'd done it himself. He knew the men because he'd worked alongside them. He had authority, but also respect because he'd earned it. The job required leadership, technical knowledge, and people skills. You had to push production without pushing too hard. You had to maintain standards without being unreasonable. You had to be tough but fair. Foremen made decent money, more than the line workers but less than the engineers. It was a step up, a sign you'd made something of yourself, and it came with respect. When the foreman spoke, people listened. But as manufacturing declined in Canada through the 70s and 80s, foreman positions disappeared. Factories closed. Production moved overseas. The jobs that required supervision vanished, and the supervisors went with them. For those whose fathers were foremen, the memories include Dad's authority, his knowledge of the plant, the respect he commanded, and the devastation when the factory closed. Job 4. Television Repairman. The television repairman was a skilled tradesman who made house calls, and in the 60s, he was essential. Televisions in the 60s were complex machines filled with vacuum tubes, capacitors, and circuits that regularly failed. When your TV broke, and it would break, you called the repairman. He'd show up with his toolbox and tube tester, diagnose the problem, and often fix it on the spot. He'd replace tubes, adjust the picture, fine-tune the antenna connection. If it needed more work, he'd take it to his shop. This required real technical knowledge. You had to understand electronics, read schematics, troubleshoot complex problems. It was skilled work that commanded respect and decent pay. Many TV repairmen worked for companies like Eaton's or Simpson's, servicing the sets they sold. Others ran independent shops. Either way, it was steady work because TVs broke constantly. The job started disappearing in the 70s as solid-state electronics made TVs more reliable. By the 80s, TVs were so cheap that repair didn't make economic sense. You just bought a new one. For those whose fathers were TV repairmen, the memories include the workshop in the basement, the smell of solder and electronics, Dad's technical knowledge, and the satisfaction when he got a dead set working again. Job 5. Coal Delivery Man. The coal delivery man was a fixture in Canadian cities and towns, keeping homes warm through brutal winters. In the 60s, many Canadian homes still heated with coal. The coal man would deliver it by the ton, backing his truck up to your house and shoveling coal down a chute into your basement coal bin. This was brutal physical work. Shoveling tons of coal day after day in all weather, the coal dust got everywhere. In your lungs, on your skin, in your clothes. You'd come home black from head to toe, but it was steady work with decent pay. Coal companies employed hundreds of delivery men. You had your route, your customers, your schedule, and people depended on you. No coal meant no heat, and in a Canadian winter, that was serious. The job required strength, endurance, and reliability. You couldn't call in sick when it was -30 and people needed coal. You showed up, you did the work, you kept people warm. The job disappeared as homes converted to oil, gas, and electric heat through the 60s and 70s. By the 80s, coal delivery was mostly gone, except in a few rural areas. For those whose fathers delivered coal, the memories include Dad's strength, the coal dust that never quite washed off, and the pride he took in keeping the neighborhood warm. Job 6, Telephone Lineman. The telephone lineman was the guy who kept Canada connected, working on poles and in all weather to maintain the phone system. In the 60s, the telephone system was entirely analog and required constant maintenance. Linemen climbed poles, strung wire, repaired connections, and installed new lines. It was skilled, dangerous work. Bell Canada and other telephone companies employed thousands of linemen. The job required technical knowledge, physical fitness, and courage. You were working 30 feet in the air in ice storms and high winds. The work was unionized and paid well. It came with benefits, job security, and respect. Linemen were essential workers before that term existed. When the phones went down, they were the ones who fixed them. The job required apprenticeship and training. You learned from experienced linemen, worked your way up, earned your journeyman status. It was a career, not just a job. Automation and new technology changed the job dramatically. Fiber optics, wireless systems, and computerized switching reduced the need for linemen. The job still exists, but in much smaller numbers and with different skills. For those whose fathers were linemen, the memories include Dad's climbing gear, the stories of working in storms, the pride in keeping people connected, and the union benefits that supported the family. Job 7, Insurance Agent, Door to Door. The door-to-door insurance agent was a salesman who built his business one household at a time, and in the 60s, he was everywhere. Companies like Metropolitan Life, Prudential, and London Life employed thousands of agents who worked territories, knocking on doors, selling life insurance, and collecting premiums weekly or monthly. This wasn't cold calling, it was relationship building. The agent knew every family in his territory. He'd visit regularly, collect the premium, update the policy, and build trust over years. The job required people skills, persistence, and integrity. You had to convince people to buy something they didn't want to think about, their own death. But you were also providing security, ensuring families would be taken care of. Agents worked on commission, but with a base salary. If you built a good book of business, you could make decent money. And there was pride in it. You were helping families, protecting them from financial disaster. The job disappeared as insurance moved to phone sales, then online. The personal relationship that defined the door-to-door agent became unnecessary. By the 80s, most agents worked from offices, not territories. For those whose fathers were insurance agents, the memories include Dad's briefcase, his knowledge of every family in the neighborhood, and the respect he commanded as someone who helped people. Job 8, Printing Press Operator. The printing press operator was a skilled tradesman who produced newspapers, books, and commercial printing, and in the 60s, it was a respected profession. Printing in the 60s was still largely mechanical, hot metal typesetting, letterpress printing, skilled operators running massive machines. It required technical knowledge, precision, and years of apprenticeship. Newspapers employed dozens of press operators. Commercial printers employed hundreds. It was unionized work with good pay and benefits. You could support a family comfortably on a pressman's wages. The work was physical, lifting heavy plates, adjusting massive machines, working with ink and chemicals. It was also skilled. You had to understand the machinery, troubleshoot problems, maintain quality. There was pride in the work. You were producing something tangible, newspapers that informed the public, books that educated, materials that businesses needed. Your work mattered. Offset printing, then digital printing, then the internet killed traditional press operator jobs. By the 90s, most of the old printing plants were closed. The massive presses were scrapped. The jobs were gone. For those whose fathers were pressmen, the memories include the smell of ink, Dad's technical knowledge, the union benefits, and the pride in producing something real. Job 9, Fuller Brush Man. The Fuller Brush Man was a door-to-door salesman selling household products, and in the 60s, he was a familiar figure in every neighborhood. Fuller Brush Company employed thousands of salesmen across Canada. They'd work territories, knocking on doors, demonstrating products, taking orders, brushes, mops, cleaning supplies, practical household items that people actually needed. The job required salesmanship, persistence, and people skills. You had to be friendly, but not pushy, persuasive, but not aggressive. You built relationships with customers who'd buy from you year after year. Salesmen worked on commission. If you were good, you could make decent money. If you weren't, you starved. It was pure capitalism. Your income depended entirely on your ability to sell. There was freedom in it. You were your own boss, set your own schedule, worked as hard as you wanted, but there was also pressure. No sales meant no income. The job disappeared as retail changed. Supermarkets and department stores made door-to-door sales obsolete. Why buy from a salesman when you could get the same products cheaper at the store? For those whose fathers were Fuller Brush men, the memories include Dad's sample case, his sales pitch, the independence he valued, and the hustle required to make a living. Job 10. Streetcar Conductor. Let's end with the streetcar conductor, because he represented urban Canadian life in the 60s. Before buses took over, Canadian cities had extensive streetcar systems. Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Winnipeg all had streetcars, and every streetcar had a conductor who collected fares, announced stops, and kept order. The conductor stood at the back of the streetcar with his ticket punch and change maker. You'd board, pay your fare, get your transfer, and find a seat. The conductor knew the regulars, helped elderly passengers, and maintained a sense of community on his route. It was steady work with decent pay and benefits. The transit unions were strong. You had job security, a pension, and respect. You were providing an essential public service. The job required people skills, patience, and reliability. You dealt with all kinds: workers, students, drunks, troublemakers. You had to maintain order without being heavy-handed. Streetcars were replaced by buses through the 60s and 70s. Buses didn't need conductors. The driver collected fares. The conductor position disappeared except in Toronto, where streetcars survived. For those whose fathers were conductors, the memories include Dad's uniform, his ticket punch, the stories of passengers, and the pride in serving the public. The feeling. Close your eyes one more time. It's 5:30 on a weekday evening, 1965. Your dad's walking up the driveway, lunch pail in hand, tired but satisfied. He's put in his 8 hours. He's earned his pay, and he's home for dinner with the family. These 10 jobs, milkman, brakeman, foreman, TV repairman, coalman, lineman, insurance agent, pressman, fuller brushman, and conductor, they're all gone now. Eliminated by technology, automation, and economic change. But they represented something we've lost. A time when a man could support his family on one income, when jobs came with security, benefits, and pensions, when work gave you identity, respect, and dignity. These weren't perfect jobs. They were hard, often dangerous, sometimes monotonous. But they were honest work that paid honest wages, and the men who worked them did so with pride. What job did your father have? What memories do you carry of his work? Share your stories in the comments. Let's honor the men who built Canada with their labor. If this video took you back, hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who remembers when work meant something different. Because these memories matter, this history matters. Thanks for watching. And remember, the past isn't just nostalgia. It's proof that we had something worth preserving.